Loudly. Pulse.
Bonvita biscuits.
Pardon?
The Bonvita biscuits by Cadbury.
Bonvita biscuit by Cadbury. Okay. Pulse. Okay. Any other? Third one? Britannia cake biscuit. Okay. All right. Great. Biscotti. Okay. Great. Okay. Now, in all these three examples, right? So, how did you come to know about Pulse? Who answered? Who said Pulse? Someone was very loudly saying Pulse.
Colleague of mine got it and he's like, this is the biggest hit nowadays, just try it. So I tried them.
Okay, all right. So, got word of mouth publicity. Someone said Bonvita biscuit. Yeah. How did you come to know about that biscuit?
I saw an ad about
You
the
saw
campaign,
an ad on
campaign that was going on, and then the ad on the television about that biscuits.
And you saw the ad on the television. Okay. How did you come to know about biscottis? Who said that? Cake biscuit? Yeah.
And I saw the campaign.
Where did you first see, get to know about this product?
I saw in the canteen.
You saw in the canteen?
And then I checked it out on YouTube.
On YouTube. Okay. All right. So, many times what happens, did you buy it by the way? You bought it? Before you checked it on Facebook or after you checked it on YouTube?
First I saw it. It was the new product which was there. I had never saw.
You bought it? Okay. Did you buy a Pulse? You bought it afterwards? You went to a store and bought it?
Yeah, after he told me, I went and bought it.
Went and bought it. Okay. You have gone and bought that Bonvita biscuit? Not yet. Okay. All right. So, wonderful. The reason that I am trying to say this, right, is coming from the point that the reverse thing applies. So, there is a huge amount of money. Okay, so let me put it this way. Why didn't you buy it? You must have gone to that canteen store of yours, right? Pardon? It's not available there. Huh? Okay. Right. So, do you see the correlation of that not working together? Now, what has happened is that Bonvita company, right, a pretty rich company, but either ways, right, has spent a lot of money on that campaign. Now, effectively, the objective of all that money being spent, right, is not to basically do some charity to some media house. Right. It was to convert that into revenues and future profits or current profits, whatever way you want to look at it, and build a brand and therefore hopefully a product category, etc., and therefore sustainable source of revenue. What has happened is that our man has seen the ad, so the campaign has worked, and he's a target consumer in a way. Right? He deserves a Bonvita also, right? Okay, right. So he is a target consumer in a way, right? Should have got it because he could not fructify it into revenue. What might happen is that if, let's say, another 6 weeks down the line, the product lands up also in that outlet, let's say the one out here, by the time this guy is bombarded with media of some 1,000 other products, most probably this same lady would have gone and told him that, why don't you try Pulse, or why don't you try this new chocolate that has come, or why don't you try this cake biscuit, or whatever it might be. Right? And his mind space is already lost. Now, what happened to the dollar that got spent on digital media? It was wasted. What happened to that future of that new product? It's gone. So, it's very important that they work in a very integrated manner, right? And it has to go literally like clockwork. So, you cannot have the reverse situation. So, let me put it in the reverse situation, right? That it's lucky that we have consumers like him who see the new product and buy it, right? But mostly what happens is people don't register the new product at all. Right? People are not that inquisitive. They don't have so much of time. There's so many products that are coming. That store is so crowded, anyways, with some 1,000 things, right? You don't have time. What ideally is that the product reach there, but within a short period of time, if I have not built awareness in the consumer's mind, right, all that goes down the drain, the product gets wasted, right, and therefore then there is a huge negative cycle that starts in the sales system. So, unless the media hits, you've got a problem, right? Or if the sales doesn't hit, then you've got a problem. Yeah? So, it has to work in conjunction together. And therefore, then, just imagine this, for even a subsection, obviously this new product does not go to, whether it's Bonvita or Pulse or whatever, right, does not go to 6 million outlets overnight, right. But even if it goes to a fraction of them, right, let's say even 1% of them, which is 60,000 outlets, yeah, something like that, yeah, right. Even if it goes to 60,000 outlets, right, if you have not managed to basically advertise for it, you will waste it. If you manage to go to only 6,000 outlets and you spend all that media campaign money, right, you have wasted that also, and you have not managed to create it, because after that this consumer is lost. Okay, what are the challenges that you have in marketing? What are the new trends in the field of sales and marketing? Someone there, right? Yeah, what is that?
Basically, I wanted to know that digital marketing, online marketing that has come up. So how do companies cope up with that, and what are the new scope within those setups?
So I'll leave aside the first part of the question, right? That was anyways I think tackled somewhere, right? In terms of new trends, there are so many trends. I mean, I can't even finish time out here to talk about it, both in sales and marketing, right? And from the Indian context itself. So forget the global trends, which are modern trade coming in and e-commerce coming in and things on that front, right? There are Indian specific trends in terms of how do you go about. So just to give you an example, right? Just 9 years back when I joined Britannia, right, there is a foot soldier of mine that is called a distributor salesman. So when I mentioned somewhere where we've got, so these 6 million outlets that I talk about, right, are directly covered through about 1.3 million outlets of mine. So 1.3 million out of these 6 million, right, where you see a Britannia product, right, are directly billed from me, are serviced directly by me, right. Some of them, especially in rural, etc., right, they buy from these 1.3 million and therefore it lands up at 6 million eventually, right. Now these 1.3 million outlets, 13 lakh outlets, are serviced by a foot soldier of mine. So there's a person who goes, right, at a certain predetermined frequency, which is set by me, right, across the corners of my country or corners of the country, right, and who goes and books orders from this guy, from these outlets, 1.3 million outlets, every day or whatever in certain predetermined frequency. Now this guy, 9 years back when I joined, used to ideally, what I wanted him to was that he used to take a certain pre-mandated order booking form sheet, which had 300 SKUs of mine in that sheet, right. So he is supposed to visit some 40-50 outlets in a day, go through all the gullies and whatever, some various villages or whatever it might be, and then book the orders. Ki baba Agarwal ji, aapko kya maal chahiye? And then he'll book, what do you want of this, that, whatever it might be, right, of those 300 SKUs. That foot soldier of mine is in the current context, and therefore 9 years back must be lower, right, is paid not more than basically 8,000 to 9,000 rupees a month. So you can imagine what kind of person it must be, right. In most cases, right, it would be a guy who is about a 10th pass, right, mar mur ke matriculation kar liya usne, ya fir at the most 12th, but definitely not a graduate, because then it's below his, how do you say, his esteem to work in that job, right. So this kind of a guy with such limited background in terms of both education profile as well as in terms of capability thereof, right, is expected to do this thing, right. So I have given him a big sheet and he is supposed to go fill it up, come back to the stock point of mine, which are about 3,500 stock points of mine, and therefore then plug that into a system, and therefore the next day's orders and the stocks go through, all that cycle happens, the regular FMCG distribution cycle. The reason I am touching upon this question, right, through this example, is that what used to happen was, so this is what I ideally wanted him to do. Right, it takes my order sheet, checks for those 300 SKUs, checks whether that biscotti is still there, has it been sold, she's bought all of them, oh, I need to give you some more, right. So he's supposed to do all that. Now the guy obviously is not capable of doing all this. So what used to invariably happen was, he'll bring some ragtag of a crap of a paper or kahin ko kuch likh dega. He'll never carry that order book office with him, right. It's pretty cumbersome for him also. And the guy has to most probably go on a bike or a cycle or something like that. He will forget about it, right. He'll go from his home directly. He'll not even go to the point where his book is lying. So there's so many filters that will happen. He'll lose the book. The book will get torn. It might get damaged, whatever it is. The book is over. and the company has not sent him a new book. Just so many challenges, and please understand, these are some 8,000 foot soldiers running across the country. Right. Now the point is that for whatever reason, there used to be a big gap between what I wanted him to do and what he did. What that resulted in was that unfortunately resulted in a lot of losses for me. So what happened was that this lady has loved the product, or that man has loved the product, he's bought all that biscotti, right. The salesman had come, he was supposed to see that, give back the biscotti, because he has taken everything, she's got nothing to see and take. So I have got loss of revenue happening, ad is running there, something similar to this, who knows. The issue is basically that there was a gap between what our man was supposed to do and what he was actually doing for practical reasons. Now what is the trend changing? So 4 years back we experimented with something, and which is something called personal, not even 4 years back, 6 years back, we tried something called a personal digital assistant. So we, there were these, the pre-form of smartphone was something called a PDA, I don't know whether you all remember, right, but there was something like that, which was, the only thing missing in that was a cellular connection, right. So we developed those instruments, right, and there were these, one of these Intel kind of companies that used to have it, right. Texas Instrument used to have it and all of them. They used to have those digital assistants that people used to carry appointments and diaries and all of that. So we tried to experiment with that. Why don't we put the order book into that? So it makes it easier for him. It's a small thing. It's much easier, and it's it doesn't have to write too much and all that kind of stuff, and make things easier for him. So that was done, right? But then there were a lot of technological challenges. The guy is not capable of understanding it, and a lot of other things. But effectively, one by one, we managed to overcome it. Now the situation is that almost something like, on last count, 85 to 90% of all these 7,000 guys, right, are now carrying. So now obviously technology is moved, right. So we finally developed an Android-based platform. So you don't have to buy a dedicated digital assistant, right. Any smartphone can work, which is 3,000 plus bucks or whatever, right. And the guy actually goes there, he runs with this, right. And therefore then, the number of lines that I managed to sell in each outlet across these 1.3 million outlets, right, has dramatically gone up. Because I managed to basically bridge this divide between what I wanted him to do and what he was actually doing, because technology enabled it. So there are a whole bunch of things that are happening. This is just one simple example of it. Similarly on the marketing side, because that time no one wanted to touch it, right, but it's worked wonders. So the kind of properties that are developing up, the kind of technology that's available. So even this digital marketing thing has got amazing possibilities in terms of targeted communication, right. I don't need to spend money across all 400 of you. I just need to go to this guy with Bonvita, right. So I don't need to, I might want to spend 2x on reaching him rather than 1x on 400 of you. I still save a lot of money. So there's so many possibilities that are there. And obviously there are a whole bunch of trends, and I guess the professors can talk a lot more about it. Huh? No, but there is a lot of stuff that's happening on it, and it's as I said, right, it's only happening faster. In fact, while you ask this question, it is triggering in my mind that what are the next things that I want to look at in the next couple of years within the sales system. And so now with that Android software that I have direct access one-to-one with these 8,000 guys. I now am basically wanting to look at, why can't I get these guys? So now what they do is, they basically plug in those orders and they come back and they dock it into the system. I've given them a docket, and that dock gets into this thing and he builds it out, right? And next day the trucks leave and go to their outlet and give him that stock, whatever is required, that outlet. The effective thing is that now what this is requiring is he's got to go to that. Now the technology and the costs are crashing so much, why can't I get it GPRS enabled? He doesn't have to go to that the stock point. He just simply he just logs in and it syncs, and it's getting so cheap. Move further, I can start communicating with him. So I am seeing literally, if he's got a working hour that is running from, let's say, 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, right, which is his working hours based on the market or whatever that opens and closes, 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock. I can actually measure his productivity from 10 to 5. I can find out when that guy is going for lunch and when that guy actually gulli maar ke chala gaya hai, wo aaya nahi ho to, jo kaam karna tha. And he's sitting at home and booking orders, which is not how he's going to find out that biscotti was not available in that outlet. So, so many possibilities that are there, and a lot of that is because of obviously technology enabling a whole bunch of things, both sales and marketing. Does that answer? Huh?
Sir, I would just extend this question.
Yeah.
Every industry is facing some kind of disruption now.
How is time?
Like,
Sorry, just 1 second. 10 minutes max? Yeah. So all these people are not very happy that he's asking the question. Yeah, go ahead.
in hotels there is OI rooms, in cabs there is Uber or Ola cab.
Right.
So what do you think would be disruptive in this industry? Like,
Just repeat the question. I'm sorry.
like in the cab aggregation industry, there is Ola and Uber who has disrupted the traditional cab market. In hotels, OI room or Airbnb has disrupted the market. So do you anticipate anything which can disrupt this market?
So if I can anticipate it, I would have started disrupting it already. Huh? The reason why it is called, everyone's awake, good dear. Huh? Okay, so the reason why it's called disruptive is because it is not anticipated. But yes, a whole bunch of things that are possible. Little less in terms of the FMCG space, because as I said, there is a certain amount of intimate interaction with the consumer that happens. But however, wherever there are assets that are lying light, right? So what is all this? All these Olas and Oyos and all of them are what? They are effectively basically asset maximization models. So all these were idle cabs lying around waiting for consumers, right? They are now suddenly got basically a mechanism by which you are able to ensure that the full 12 hours of the driver or his cab is getting utilized. That was fixed cost that is lying idle. Because it is getting utilized and that fixed cost is getting amortized over a larger number of trips, they are able to crash the price down, etc., etc., etc. The issue is that this model itself is expandable and obviously it's going to many other areas. So now trucking companies are doing the same thing. There are a whole bunch of trucks. So you go onto a highway and you will see some trucks lying on the highway or near a transport yard. They are all waiting for someone to give them business. And sometimes many of these guys are simply waiting for 2, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. But effectively there are some millions of other consumers also who are roaming around, right, saying that humko truck chahiye. But there is no meeting, right. What this Ola has done, a meeting of a consumer and an asset. A similar thing has been applied a lot of other places. But yes, there is disruption that can happen in FMCG also. Right, a disruption can happen in various parts of the business model. The biggest one, right, is in terms of the product itself. And that's what I was saying, that we've got that young manager group that I talked about is basically wanting to challenge us on that. That can you help us with what is potential disruption? So will 20 years down, consumers want to eat products the way they eat it right now? Will that be the in thing? Would you like to go to a friend, say that, hey, bas dekho, maine ye biscuit leke aaya. What biscuit hai? So how are you going to ensure that you stay relevant to that consumer? So it's not very different from the traditional game, right? But it's going to be faster. But that's only one part of the business model. There are other parts of the business model and which can also become USPs. So let me give you a very different example, and which I personally lived through. Right, so Asian Paints, right, was very famous for its supply chain. Right, there were a lot of case studies. So when I used to do MBA, uske bade case studies chalte the, how they manage their supply chain. And that time, there was no this SAP connectivity, kuch nahi tha. So how do they manage such complexity? The complexity was you had so many different kinds of products. Each one of them had basically something like 50 to 100 colors, right? Each one of them of product color combination had basically various sizes. Right, and all of these had to be available across various parts of the country because consumers were wanting to buy it everywhere. Now the point is this basically, consolidated into something like 3,000, 4,000 SKUs. Now just to keep one unit of each SKU, you will need a massive warehouse. Now how are you going to manage it? But consumer is obviously going to come with a demand ki mere ko to ye product, ye color, ye chahiye. Right, and if you are able to manage it right, you've got a revenue. If you're not able to manage it right, you have lost revenue if someone else manages it. So these guys were doing very well. So however, right, disruption came, right, and unfortunately in that case, Asian Paints was not the disruptor. Was the market leader, was not the disruptor. So a small guy, I think a 4th or 5th in the market share ladder, right, who managed to come with this, which was a technology which was known worldwide. right? And they came with something called a dealer tinting machine. So what it did was those 70,000 outlets that I told you in the country which are selling paints, right? They said that, yeah, you don't need to keep these 3,000 SKUs or whatever random combination of these. All that I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you a white, right? And I'm going to give you some 16 various pigments, and I'm going to give you a machine. That's called a dealer tinting machine. So you don't keep all this massive warehouse with so many SKUs and then, hopefully pray that the consumer buys whatever you have in stock and things on that front, right? Let the consumer choose whatever he wants, right? Whatever he or she wants. You just punch in that code, that whatever color he is choosing, punch it into that machine, and machine will use a combination of that white and the 16 pigments and make the color there and then. And therefore then the SKU requirement crashed. Overnight, right, the complexity or the business model changed. Then it was no longer a supply chain game. So the USP of that company, right, was suddenly completely disrupted. Obviously the company learned very fast and therefore it had enough other levers available, right, but it was most important that it learned very fast. So I think Asian Paints would have taken about 18 months to develop its own dealer tinting machine after the first one got launched by a competitor here. So 18 months was the lead time that competitor had. Unfortunately, that guy did not have the wherewithal to drive it as hard as required within those 18 months. If he had got that wherewithal, right, there would have been a different game altogether right now. But since they didn't, and these guys realized it fast, so it could have also been that Asian Paints could have been a Bajaj scooter fellow. कि ये तो कुछ होने नहीं वाला है, I have got the best supply chain system in place, right? ये सब machine नहीं चलेगी ये India के अंदर. He could have as well thought that way and sat on it for 5 years. By that time, that fellow would have ensured that this guy would have been out of business. So disruption can happen in various parts, right? The age-old one is obviously product, right? But there are various parts of the business model that can have a disruption. But it's very difficult to predict. He'll be a billionaire by now if I do. Yeah. Are freshers preferred? What are the? Are freshers preferred? If so, why? Who was that?
Sir, there is this notion that I've heard of that freshers have an unbiased view as compared to the work-ex people. So, do companies also hold this notion, and if yes, what does it really mean? That's all.
It's a fact of life. The more you spend time in anything, right, the more you get, how do you say, you get molded. It's a fact of life. So if I spend a good part of my early years playing the violin, right, it's not going to be easy for me to tomorrow play the piano. Because there is a certain, how do you say, mind, hand, eye coordination that has been fixed into me over the years of continuous practice of it. So there is a fact of life that you get molded in a certain form. Can you unmold yourself? Yeah, that's also a fact of life. Right? So there's nothing permanent, especially in the human mind. Right? However, it's not easy. It's not easy. Right? So I don't think there's a very hard bound rule in terms of preference for freshers. Right? Freshers, you should look with the perspective of, look at it this way, that your working life is going to be almost right up till the age of 70, right? At least at current life expectancy, right? So the point is that in that 2 or 3 years is not molding you. But yeah, if I have been, let's say for example, a research scientist for 10 years of my life, and now suddenly, as I said, I want to go to Gopi Chand and say that boss, मेरे को badminton खेलना है, right? You might have to accept a little compromise in life. But so be it, it's your passion. You want to be a badminton player, then so be it. But I don't think, freshers means technically saying that zero work-ex. I don't think that's critical. Does that answer? Okay, alright. How important is it to get into sales before getting into marketing? I think we talked about it. Right. Great. So any follow through? Last few questions. Yeah. Man, these guys are going to really bash you up now.
Britannia used to advertise with those fat four, if I'm not wrong, Ganguly and Jadeja and Dravid were
one of the brand ambassadors of Britannia in 90s, late 90s.
Yeah.
In today's world, there is no cricketer as a brand ambassador for Britannia or a famous personality. Why is that?
गलत orientation
And how about cricketers?
about cricketers. It's a very simple, there is nothing against celebrities per se. So as he said, we've got Deepika Padukone, we've got this fellow, what kya hai uska naam? Farhan Akhtar. We've got, who was that? We had Salman Khan till about a couple of years back, right, for a Tiger brand, right. So there's nothing hard and fast against it. It's just a pure play economic this thing. So there are times wherein, see, the point is that have you managed to get the right deal? So it's like even properties. So for example, Britannia was never associated with Filmfare. Now it's been sponsoring Filmfare for the last 3 years, or 4 years actually, right. So we are the title sponsors for Filmfare for the last 4 years because we managed to get the property at the right deal. So it's pure economics, there's nothing against it, right. So tomorrow you might find out that, the next Kohli is available cheap and we managed to crack it. It's also, have you been able to catch it just like you managed to catch the Kabaddi League or whatever, right? Because you always want to extract the max for your buck. Now you go to Kohli, it will be very costly, right? So that kind of stuff, it's pure economics, nothing against it. Anyone else? Great, I think we are overshot, right? So thank you very much guys, right? Wish you all the best.
We are thankful to Mr. Gunjan Shah for having such an interactive session. In fact, very different from the previous sessions that we have. So all our questions and doubts have been answered, and this is the best closure for Vertical Summit that we could have. And now I request from IIC Mr. Abhishek to hand over the memento to Mr. Gunjan Shah.